Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, we're back again this week for all those people who like to listen to us. And thank you for those who do. And thanks to all those people who share our little posts on Twitter about what we have coming up each day. Thank you for downloading the podcast each week. Those numbers have gone up in recent weeks. And I think it's just because nobody has anything better to do on a Monday afternoon or Tuesday to download that thing. John, thanks for coming into the show again today.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it. Let's have a good one.
Yeah, we're going to talk several different things in this show today. We're going to do the NFL draft here in a little bit. We're each going to do our own top 5 draft picks. But first, some news that came out just not about 20 minutes ago. Governor Andy Beshear announced that there will be no more in-person schooling. The schools will not be open for the rest of the 2020 school semester here. They will stick with the online learning. I think Caverna, Glasgow, and Barron County have all put out messages on social media about the fact that they're going to follow those guidelines. And these things are guidelines. I guess a school district could decide to do whatever it wants, but that would probably be foolish. So they're
worst kept secret in mankind history, that there'd be no more in-person school. I think that's not a shock.
Yeah, the states around us have already done that, and I guess we were hoping, because we took to the social distancing and the closing of the schools about a week earlier than Tennessee and Ohio and some of the other states, that we may have an opportunity to open back up. But I guess they just don't feel comfortable with the ability to control the spread of the virus if you put people back in classrooms.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought we'd go back as long as we have the restrictions on so many things. I didn't see that opening up.
Yeah. Now, of course, what this probably means is that the KHSAA said they would take until May 1 to make a decision on any type of spring sports season. But without schools in session, I imagine the superintendents around the state and the administrators around the state would not feel comfortable having any type of athletic activities. Nothing has been officially said. I'm just following what has happened so far, and so I would say following Ohio, Tennessee, and some of the other states around us that have officially canceled spring sports, we're on our way to that point.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I don't know really what to say. They hadn't made that decision, but it's clearly that's the pattern, and until you see professional sports open up, it's kind of hard to see if high school sports will open up right now. They can still postpone it. I mean, they can still move it back to late May, June, or July if they wanted to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I hope they keep that in mind. But I've got a niece that's a really good softball player that I know that she's itching to play, and I'd love for her to get the opportunity. But we'll see.
I would imagine, though, what they would have to do is eliminate the idea of the summer dead period, and a lot of people would have to cooperate in ways to figure out how to play at least some games in June and probably July. I would think they would have to wrap it up before the start of the next academic school year on July 15th or whatever that is. But I don't know. I mean, that's just my speculation. Anyway. Yeah. I hope they figure out something. Still, I hope they figure out something. There's been nothing official on the athletic side of things. There has been official statements on the academic side of things. So let's get to this here NFL draft. It is Thursday night, and usually,
thank goodness.
Yeah, for real.
I've looked forward to this for probably 6 weeks, to say the least.
Yeah.
I'm tired of talking about shutdowns and closings and nobody playing. So this is as good as it's going to get Thursday night.
Yeah, and actually, I think this, they have this virtual draft. They're going to do a virtual draft, and I think they ran a test of it today. Ran into a few hiccups, probably related to internet services and things of that nature, because it's not like everybody is on a closed network. They're on their own, whatever, home network or wherever their office is, network, as they're trying to perform this virtual draft. So If you live out in the woods somewhere and you don't have high-speed lines coming to you, you might be at risk a little bit. But I imagine most of these folks have taken care of that already.
I would think so.
So let's you and I just get into this draft, all right?
All right, let's go.
I'm going to let you go first. Now, the top 5 picks are. We're just going to do the top 5 here. The top 5 picks are Cincinnati, Washington, Detroit, the New York Giants, and the Miami Dolphins. And I think everybody has Cincinnati pegged for who they believe they're going to take. But I'm going to let you go ahead. Who do you think Cincinnati Bengals are going to take?
They're going to take Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
No question about it. An Ohio kid had probably one of the best years of any player in history at the quarterback position last year. I don't think they have a choice. It's Joe Burrow, and if they can put good pieces around him, I think he could be a great player.
The interesting thing about Cincinnati, I broke down their schedule. They lost 7 games by a touchdown or less. And you look at Andy Dalton's stats, he threw 16 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, but the receiving core was not very good at all.
A.J. Green didn't play last year.
That's right. He did not play at all last year. So to some degree, I don't know that the quarterback is their problem, but I believe you are right that the Bengals just don't have a choice. If they did not take Joe Burrow, him being an Ohio kid and all that kind of stuff, a Southern Ohio kid, they would just be ridiculed to no end. That's
a no-brainer. They're going to pick him.
Yeah. Now, I do believe that they probably shouldn't. I think they should probably trade that pick and try to get some other talent that they should fill out the roster a little bit in some areas. That's what I think.
Okay, I don't. I think the most important player on the team in football is the quarterback, and true, he has to have other players around him. But your quarterback can play for 20 years, and I think he's a special player.
Yeah, I like Joe Burrow. Like I said, I don't disagree with their pick. I'm of the mind that you trade that first pick and you fill out your roster. And you can get a quarterback in the 6th round if you want to. Anyway, you might get Tom Brady.
A lot of Tom Brady's. You're right.
Yeah. But anyway, so then the Redskins have the 2nd pick, and I think they also have a no-brainer choice. How do you feel about the Redskins pick, John?
Well, of course, everybody said they're going to take Chase Young. I would take. The quarterback from Alabama. I'll let you pronounce his last name.
Tua Tagovailoa?
Yeah, I am not sold at all on the Washington quarterback, Dwayne Haskins. Of course, that was their first pick last year, and it's hard to give up on your first round pick. But what's worse than giving up on your first round pick is sticking with your first round pick at the quarterback position if it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was bad last year, and I think Tua is another player, a quarterback that could be special. He clearly has the injury risk, but who doesn't? And just like Arizona last year, they went back-to-back quarterbacks in the first round, and they gave up on one, and they went with Kyler Murray the next year. I think if I'm Washington, I would seriously consider taking Tua. If you don't take Tua, then Chase Young is the obvious pick.
Yeah, Dwayne Haskins did not look ready for prime time in any way last year.
He looked unprepared, and when he played, didn't play very well.
Yeah, and so he would have to make a monstrous leap in the offseason to be the quarterback again next year because they really didn't do anything in free agency to shore up that position. So I would say they also are in a position that they can make a big trade there at that number 2 spot for somebody who really needs Chase Young. And I'm not saying they don't need him because I think Chase Young's pretty outstanding. But I'm with you. Their offense their quarterback position just does not look settled in any way. But I still think they're probably
the one area you want to be settled in, I can tell you that.
Yeah. But I actually think I think they're going to stick with Chase Young.
They will. No, I agree. They're going to stick with Chase Young. You asked me who I'd pick, though, and I would take Tua.
Well, and that kind of brings me, I'm going to spoil the back end of my little draft chart here because I actually think the Miami Dolphins will try to make a move up to get Tua Tagovailoa.
Okay. Well, they got to go to number 3 probably.
Yeah. I mean, so I would say they could make a trade with either Detroit or, depending on what they could package together with Washington, if Washington thinks they can still get Chase Young in some way, and that's who they really want. I think the Dolphins probably are more desperate for that quarterback. The Redskins, by the way, I think Miami is not too far off from being a good team, and I just think Washington is a perpetual train wreck. They never seem to get anything right.
They've traditionally are a great franchise until Daniel Snyder took over. That's right, and they have kind of been stuck in mediocrity or worse for about 15 years.
Yeah, so I'm with you. If they take somebody, they're going to take Chase Young. If they happen to wake up and they get smart just for a minute, and either they take Tagovailoa or they make a trade and try to flesh out the roster and get a quarterback in some other way.
Right.
Number 3 pick is Detroit.
Speaking of mediocrity.
Right. Yeah. I guarantee also Detroit will make a bad pick here, but I think I've got their answer for them. You go ahead, though. Who do you think they're going to take?
Well, every draft prediction of Detroit, unless they trade, is the defensive back from Ohio State, Jeff Okudah, and so I expect that's who they'll probably pick, Okudah. But whether or not they were terrible last year on defense. I think Detroit has a bigger problem than that. Is I'm not sold on their coaching staff at all, to be honest with you. He's was the defensive coordinator for Belichick and
Patricia.
But man, they looked disinterested half the time last year and so forth. But they really like this kid, and he's by far, it seems what I've read, the best. He's like a shutdown corner, and they in that division with Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure you need a shutdown corner. But Detroit needs a lot of things, and I don't know if anybody can go in there and help them. They have a good quarterback, but they haven't been able to do much with him in the 10 years that he's been there.
Yeah, you mentioned they have a good quarterback, and that leads me to the pick that I think they should take, which is Jerry Jeudy. I think they should try to figure out the best way possible to score as many points as possible because they're in there with Chicago, which is not very good offensively. You can figure out ways to beat them if you can score points. The problem is, if they pick up one defensive player or two defensive players, I don't think that helps them against Green Bay or Minnesota.
Maybe not. You're right. I mean, Detroit. There's two franchises that I can never figure out, and that's Detroit and Buffalo. Right. And Detroit, it just seems like to me, is always pretty much in the same situation year in, year out, even though they do have a good quarterback, but it just has never really worked out. I just don't think they're led very well, and they seem to be picking at the top of the draft about every year.
Yeah, and apparently not picking all that well as part of that process.
No question.
And then next up, we have the New York Giants. Who do you think the Giants should be going with here?
Well, a lot of people think they're going to go for that lineman from Iowa. I think his name's Tristan Wirfs. Mm-hmm. But I got a feeling they're going to go defensively. I mean, the Giants, when the Giants were really good, they had great rushers, great defensive players.
Yep.
They're another team that couldn't stop anybody last year, and I wouldn't be surprised they go with the kid out of Clemson. I really like him, Isaiah Simmons. Mm-hmm. He can, he's outside linebacker. He can play any position, safety. I think he's a playmaker, and I would just be reluctant to draft a lineman that high up there. They do need somebody. They got a quarterback they like, and Barkley. I mean, and Matt Jones. And they got the Saquon Barkley, the running back they like. Both two good young players, so they need somebody to block. So I can understand going with the lineman for Iowa, but I think a bigger impact player overall is Simmons or even Derek Brown from Auburn.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength here because you're right. If you look at those Super Bowls the Giants won against the Patriots, I mean, Eli Manning played fine in those Super Bowls, but the truth was their defense was outstanding, and they really were able to always put pressure on people, especially just with their four-down linemen, which led me to say I felt like they should go with Derek Brown in front of the linebacker out out of Clemson. Although, again, the Giants are one of those teams. If I could figure out a way to get two good defensive players, because I really think they're not that far off on offense. I mean, I think Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and the players that they have around them are good enough on offense to do things. They couldn't stop anybody last year. I mean, they were terrible on defense, and they just got to figure out how to fill that gap.
I agree with that, and they've had trouble with their line too. The line has not been very good.
No, it hasn't
for years. So, but that high up in the draft, I think you need an immediate impact player and a pass rusher like Simmons, or a dominant defensive tackle like Brown would make sense.
Yeah, so I like both of those. All right, now we're up to the Miami Dolphins. Who you looking at here for the Dolphins?
Well, if Tua is still around, I like Tua.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's they have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's very serviceable, but he's not a long-term solution.
Yeah.
So they clearly need a quarterback long-term, and of course some people say Justin Herbert from Oregon, but I don't know. I mean, he's something about Herbert. He's been there. He's a 4-year starter, but I don't know. He just seems awful mechanical to me. He fits in terms of he's got great size and he's a good athlete, but again, I think Tua could be a special player, and the injury concern is the only real concern. That's a big deal, but if I'm Miami, I'm taking Tua.
Well, and you mentioned Herbert. The thing about me for the Oregon quarterbacks is they never quite seem to pan out in the NFL at the level that you think they should.
True.
And, I mean, it's just – I don't know what the deal is. I mean, they've had several very good college quarterbacks at Oregon, and they get to the NFL, and they just never quite turn into top-notch NFL quarterbacks to the level you need them to. And that's
you can say the same thing about Alabama.
Yeah, you can say the same thing about Alabama, and I guess that's the thing. If I'm picking somebody from Alabama, most often I'm going to pick somebody from their defense because they almost always seem to pan out.
And receivers.
That is correct.
They've had big-time receivers. But I think, too, is different, and offensively Alabama has changed in the last 3 or 4 years, too. They have, clearly adopted the more the wide-open offense and so forth, And I like I said, I've already said this 100 times. I think Tua is special. I think Burrow and Tua could be great quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Dolphins will do whatever it takes to get Tua Tagovailoa. That's what I think. I mean, they'll make trades. I believe they will do. They will not sit there and wait for him and hope that he lands there. Even though some people are projecting him to go, as low as 6. I believe they'll try to figure out a way to get to him because you're right. They have Josh Rosen on the roster. They traded for him. He obviously was not going to work out.
No, he couldn't be that Fitzpatrick. He couldn't be that Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I mean, and Fitzpatrick, like you said, is not long-term. He's a stopgap measure because he's 37 years old. He's a fine NFL quarterback, but he's not a long-term solution in any way. So I think I think Miami is not that far off from being a good football team.
Well, they won 5 out of the last 7, something like that, at the end of the year, and it looked like they were tanking at the start of the year, but clearly they weren't.
Yeah.
And they finally found something there, and I think Miami's got 3 first-round picks, too. So, they're a team that it looks like this is one of Belichick's assistants that looks like may be a good fit as a head coach. Not all of the tree branches of Belichick has worked out as well as you may think. But
they've
it seems
not
like
all
this
blossomed
guy's
into
pretty
great
good.
coaches. But, yeah, so I'm with you on that. I think the Dolphins do whatever they can to get to a Tagovailoa, and I think that's something to look forward to.
Well, and there's 2 Kentucky people, too, that got a shot at being in the top 10. They didn't play at Kentucky, but I'm talking about 2. Jedrick Willis is a lineman from Alabama. He went to Lexington Lafayette High School, and he's clearly looks like a top 10 pick. And the University of Louisville's got an offensive lineman. His last name is Becton. He weighs about 360, and he had a little issue with a positive drug test that just came out, though. Got flagged by the NFL, but I still think he will probably stay in that top 10, top 15 range.
Yeah, that'll be 2 very good offensive linemen that could land up there in that top 15. That'll be interesting to see. You mentioned that the guy at Louisville and the guy who's from Lexington but played at Alabama. Outside of that, there aren't really a whole lot of standouts from the schools here or former Kentucky residents, as there has been in other recent drafts.
No, the quarterback at Kentucky that played quarterback at the end of the year, Bowen.
Yeah.
It will be, he won't be a first rounder, but I can't see him going past the third or fourth. Mm-hmm. And he looks like to me a type of player that somebody like New England would take. A guy that can play multiple positions and so forth. A hard-nosed kid. I'm kind of interested to see not only when he goes, where he goes, but how he's going to be utilized.
Yeah. He's a fascinating. He's a football player, as they used to say.
Yes.
He's not a position. He's a football player. All right, this is the Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, you and I kind of had an impromptu conversation, not on air, but just between us last week, about the future of the NCAA sports and how these things are going to shake out. And part of that conversation has to do just with the financial hit that university athletic budgets are taking at the moment, and how they're going to deal with that. We saw that Cincinnati has canceled its men's soccer program, and I think we're going to see more of this kind of stuff. I don't know any way around it. But there are other things that could happen maybe that would save secondary sports, but it would limit some of your primary sports, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think I think one of the things that's going to come out of all this is that businesses, schools, and all kinds of groups are going to have to maybe revisit whatever model that they've been depending on, and that's one of the things I think a lot of the college sports are going to have to look at. And in order to perhaps save programs, they're going to have to do some different things. And of course, right now the cash cow is college football. And if for some reason they don't play this year, which I think is a ridiculous argument even to make right now, but it's been bannered around, and I just cringe when you start thinking about canceling stuff 4 months away.
Yeah, when you say not play this year, you mean in the fall sports?
In the fall, right, and so forth. I mean, that would have a ripple effect on every other sport that a college offers, because right now college football, and to some extent men's basketball, is the cash cow, and other sports depend on that money that comes in. So, there's a lot of things that I think schools are going to have to revisit, and even if they do play, probably ticket sales will probably be down anyway this year, just because of, I don't know exactly the reaction people are going to be if they're going to just go to some of these events as normal as the past. It may take us a little bit longer, but some things that we discussed, and things that I always wondered would be why does college football at Division I level, why is there 80 full scholarships in college football? Mm-hmm. I've never really understood why you need 80.
Yeah, and part of what our discussion was that you and I had a few days ago stemmed from the fact that the non-Power 5 conferences are going together and asking, like, I guess it's the Committee on Division I Athletics, or I don't remember exactly what it's called, that sets the bar for what it's required to be a Division I program. And you have to have, I think, like 14 programs that are funded at a certain level that they can compete at a Division I level if you want to have, like, football and basketball at a Division I level. And so they were asking for some reprieve from the requirements because of what they...
And attendance.
Yeah, and attendance at football especially. I think the minimum is 15,000 average, and so they're asking for like a break on that, I think it was. And so that's kind of what got us started about the conversation. And one of the things is these smaller colleges and these smaller these smaller conferences, but also I think your lower tier schools and your Power 5 conferences face the same issue, is how do we fund all of this so that we can maintain this status? And basically a lot of this has been they've been running in front of a rock for a long time in a lot of ways, because so much of their budget is the sharing within the conference that is a part of the TV rights and things of that nature that comes. It's not even related to attendance itself. It's these sidebar things, which are also all basically funded by advertising. And so if businesses are not advertising as much, or they're being more selective about how they advertise, then they're looking at, am I going to put my name on this bowl game, or am I going to put it somewhere else because I don't want to face any backlash from funding a bowl game, right? And so that's all kind of tied into it as well. And if the schools can't play the required number of games, or they can't get the attendance, or they can't fund the programs, then they're going to have to make a decision. Is the Power 5 going to be a thing by itself and the rest of us somewhere else? Or are we going to try to maintain this NCAA as it is constituted presently?
All good questions, and all things that, unfortunately, money is the key to all this, right? I mean, you hate to say that, but that's what it comes down to. And as I mentioned, college football is the cash cow, and that's because of college football, you have women's tennis or men's tennis, or a lot of non-revenue sports are funded that way.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it actually could be a positive refiguring if do you, as I said, I mean, can you get by at the Division I football without 80 scholarships? Can you get by with 70 and then use those other, save that money for something else?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I always question why. We talk about this too. This jump into these mega conferences in the last 10 years was mainly due for football.
Mm-hmm.
Because it never made sense to me why Syracuse would be in the same conference as Miami, which means that the Syracuse baseball team and softball team and lacrosse team and swimming team also has to travel these long distances.
Yeah.
And it, to me, financially, made no sense to me. And you can come up with almost every school going right now. I mean, it's a financial burden on a lot of the minor conferences, minor sports in these conferences that stretch thousands of miles. It makes no sense, really, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, and I've always been opposed to the idea that every sport is created the same. You and I have discussed this as it relates to the KHSAA and how it tries to regulate football and basketball and baseball and swimming and cross country, or just whatever. They tries to put all these sports in the same kind of box because it's easy for them to manage, but it's not necessarily fair to the sports themselves.
Right.
And so that's true for the NCAA as well. I mean, why can't you have a regional conference for your swim program or your baseball program?
You should. Or maybe just makes more sense. Just have your own. How about just having your own conference for football? Mm-hmm. And then all your minor sports should be more regional. That would make more sense to me. If you want to play big-time college football, that's fine, but, it shouldn't cost us an arm and a leg to take our baseball team from one part of the country to another part of the country just for a conference game.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and used to it wasn't that way. I mean, like the old Metro Conference was a basketball conference. You had schools that you had schools that didn't have football programs in the Metro Conference, and then you had football programs that played at the FBS level, that kind of stuff. FCS level, Division II level. And so they didn't try to make you fit that in there. But I guess when it comes to the revenue generation for football and basketball, what happens is they try to make it uniform so that it's just easier to sell and manage, I guess.
Yes, it does, but not necessarily financially, though.
No, not when you have circumstances beyond your control, that you can't plan for. And these things do happen in the world on a somewhat routine basis, not like what we're going through at the moment, but you always have the unknown possibilities down the road, and they will disrupt things. So I mean, I'm with you. I would like to see a return to, if you want to have the Big 12 football conference, you have the Big 12 football conference, but then, you have the state of Texas baseball conference, whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that will be revisited, and now I know not all this is taxpayer money, but a lot of it is private money, is the exorbitant salaries at a lot of these schools for your football and basketball coaches.
Yeah, when you look down the list of the highest paid public employees in many states, they are some sort of athletic coach at college.
Yeah, and I know a lot of it is privately raised money, but if you could raise $5 million if you can pay $5 million for a football coach and it's privately raised, well, that same $5 million could also fund an entire swimming and track team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if some university presidents or more university presidents try to take the reins of this setup at their institutions to say, all right, you have to raise a match. All right, if you want to raise such and such amount to boost this coach's funding, then you need to raise a match, and that money has to go to some sort of secondary sports. And maybe the university presidents and the school boards at those universities begin to actually apply some leverage to try to provide more opportunities for more students.
Yeah, there's we're just kind of brainstorming, but there's no question there's going to be changes. There's going to be sports that either are going to be eliminated or temporarily suspended. I don't think there's any question that's going to happen.
Right.
And it gets even more interesting if what they do with football. I don't think there's any way possible financially they can miss football. Now, maybe they can push it back. Mm-hmm. But if they're going to have the stance that we're just not going to play because until we let kids on campus, then I can't tell you how that will cause a whole lot of more issues.
Yeah, well, and you'll have student athletes who probably were doing early enrollment this spring, so that they could get a head start. They may not be able to do that now, or they did and they're not able to do anything with that. But so you already have future student athletes in the pipeline that will need to be dealt with and figured out how they're going to, what they're going to do with their scholarships, what they're going to do with them, and that kind of thing. So it's not just like somebody can say, all right, we're going to have sports or we're not going to have sports. There's so much logistical stuff that goes with that beyond the obvious, what about when the games are played and whether or not fans are going to be there. There's so much stuff institutionally that has to be dealt with as well. Yeah,
and I think barring a catastrophe that sports at the college level needs to be played if they can in the fall.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Safe, but it can't be a situation where that it has to be completely eradicated or we're never going to play again. I think they've got to kind of got to figure out a balance somehow.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and there will be people who won't like whatever that balance is, but
True.
I mean, I hope that they at least adhere to the regulations and rules that are set in place to help protect us, each other, and the student athletes, the students themselves, and the institutions, and the future of the sports, as a matter of fact.
I agree. Yeah, I do too.
Well, this Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the NFL draft this Thursday is not the only draft that happened last week. We had the WNBA draft, and that one was kind of interesting in a couple of ways. I think there was at least some thought or hope that Dee Givens from WKU would have a shot. They have 3 rounds, would have a shot of being selected in one of those rounds. She wasn't picked. And then the first 2 picks in the draft, though, were both from Oregon, and it tells you how good that Oregon team was this year, I guess.
No, they were them and South Carolina were I thought the best 2 teams in the country.
Yeah.
By far.
So when you looked at that draft, and also Louisville had two players go the last pick in the first round and the first pick in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, Jasmine Jones was the last pick, and they both went to the same team. They went to the New York Liberty.
Yeah.
Where Asia Darius, who was the second pick last year from Louisville. So Louisville's got three players on the Liberty. But yeah, Jasmine Jones and Carrie Schrupp, I believe, 6'4" girl from Louisville. They went back to back.
Yeah, I think. So back to those first picks. I mean, I think there was no surprise. Sabrina Ionescu was the best player in the country last year.
Also went to New York. So
yeah.
New York had 5 of the first 15 picks, I believe.
Yeah, they were. I think one of those they traded away to Minnesota, but that was the one that they traded away was the girl from Rice, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
So yeah, they were restocking their team, their starting five, I suppose, in this draft as best they could. But yeah, Sadhu Sabali from Oregon, she went to the Dallas Wings. Then Lauren Cox of Baylor went to the Indiana Fever. Chinity Carter went to the Atlanta Dream.
Texas A&M, she's a heck of a guard.
Yeah, and then Bella Abri from Princeton went to the Dallas Wings. It was nice.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I was not really aware of her. I mean, her father played with Jay Billis at Duke. I remember Mark Allery, but I've never seen his daughter play. Didn't see a lot of Princeton games last year.
Yeah, you didn't have that on your NCAA live cast kind of thing going on?
That surprised me. I watched the draft. I mean, I like it, but that one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, and then one of the things I didn't talk about last week. This actually happened before last week's show. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the fact that Vic Schaefer left Mississippi State and went to Texas. A little bit surprising, but of course he's originally from Austin, so not so much. And we kind of talked about the fact that it was going to be hard to find a good replacement for him. But I think Mississippi State probably hit gold. They hired Nikki McCray-Penson. Former WKU assistant back in 2006, 2008. Presently, she had been the Old Dominion head coach the last 3 years and had really turned that program around.
They had a really good year this year. They won over 20 games and I think Rice and Old Dominion and Western were the top three teams in the conference. And, she did a good job. Of course, probably her biggest claim to fame is she played for Pat Summitt at Tennessee, won a national championship, won a gold medal as well. Mm-hmm. So she's got the pedigree. Now, listen, Old Dominion is a good program, and she did a good job. But replacing Vic Schaefer, I don't think anybody in the country has done as good a job as he has, getting his team to back-to-back Final Four, not just Final Four, final games. Mm-hmm. And putting up the numbers that he has put since he's been there is incredible. So she'll have her hands full to put up the numbers that he's put up.
Yeah, at Old Dominion, her first year they went 8-23, and the second year they went 21-10, and they were 24-6 this year, and they were the 2 seed in the women's CUSA tournament that never got started. And so not at the same level as what Vic Schaefer did at Mississippi State in terms of taking a moribund program and turning it into a Final Four or a championship contender, but she did turn around a program that is not necessarily known for being a great basketball program.
That's true, and she should be able to recruit with her pedigree. The schools that I just said, plus she was a South Carolina assistant too. So, I mean, there are good players in Mississippi and the surrounding states, and the key to college is not only developing players, you got to get players.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that Vic Schaefer did at Mississippi State. He got a lot of homegrown talent and sprinkled in a few from surrounding states, and he turned that program into a monster.
Well, and she grew up in Collierville, Tennessee, which is a Memphis suburb, and so I imagine she probably has a lot of connections in that North Mississippi, South Tennessee area. That's a pretty good area for women's basketball.
Yes, yeah. Like I said, she's a very good coach. I just think it's hard to replace people like Vic Schaefer, who just turns the program around and gets them to such a high level. That is really, really hard to do.
Yeah, it's Would you rather be the coach that built the program or the one following the person who built the program?
Well, that's a good question because I kind of followed Coach Steenberg when I took over at Barron, and he had established a great tradition there.
Yeah,
so that made my job easier, but there's also some pressure and stress to that as well.
Yeah, luckily I think you did pretty well pretty early in your stint there. So I mean, you kind of put whatever naysayers had been there to sleep early.
Well, I mean, the program was established and the culture was established, so that certainly did help.
Yeah. So you are aware you are aware of the efforts to replace a legend, because that's definitely what Bobby Steenbergen is at Barron County.
That's exactly right. But he helped too. So he helped hire me. He was my athletic director, and he was tremendous in terms of advising me, but also giving me space to do my own thing.
You know, I hadn't really thought about that. You know, Schaefer left Mississippi State. He's in Texas, so there's nobody there to say, yeah, give this kid a chance, so to speak, which you may have had that slight advantage there whenever you took over for Steenbergen.
That's right, and of course Coach Steenbergen was there as well, so I wouldn't like coaching against him either anywhere. But she'll do well. It's just people's expectations. You know, if they think that she's supposed to get them back to a Final Four every year, like he had started to do, then those are tough standards to keep up with.
Yeah, that's true.
And as you can see in Mississippi State football, once
Dan
Mullen left for Florida, Mississippi State football has not been the same.
No, no, you're right. I mean, sometimes you have coaches that they don't just build a program; they kind of are the program in so many ways, and those ones are very hard to replace. You can't copy what they did because they had to do it differently building the program. But you can certainly falter by not being able to maintain what they have done.
Especially at those type of programs that are not established for, Kentucky will be good in basketball for the most part regardless. I mean, it's just a culture deal. I mean, occasionally, Billy Gillespie came in and kind of screwed up. But for the most part, I mean, John Calipari has done a great job, but so did Rick Pitino, so did Tubby Smith, and, so did Joe Hall, so, Eddie Sutton. I mean, that culture is there. It's the programs that are just built up by one person, like Tennessee women. Once Pat retired, they've not been close to being as good.
Yeah.
They've not had that successful, continued success of the program. And that's what I wonder with Mississippi State. Can they continue with a program that has not been known in women's basketball for the most part?
I think that's also true for a program like LSU that had Sue Gunter there for a long time, and they even tried to bring in, her former point guard and assistant, and they just could not maintain what had been established there.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're right. I mean, sometimes the coach is the program, and it makes it look like there's a culture, but it's not really. It doesn't really extend past that person, I don't think, and that may be true at Mississippi State. And WKU probably faced that same kind of thing a couple of times in the women's program, but they seem to have an actual culture within the program that supersedes the coach itself.
They do. They have a rich. I mean, it started with Paul Sanford for the most part, but it has been maintained throughout the years as a really it's such good support. There's a core group of people that support Lady Topper basketball, and that is there's always been expectations. The only thing that's happened to Western women has been the growth of Louisville and Kentucky. When they basically began to take women's basketball seriously, and then you throw the weight of the SEC and the ACC behind it, and Matthew Mitchell and Jeff Walls are getting paid over $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once those programs began to take it seriously, it made it a little bit more difficult at times for Western in terms of recruiting in-state and things like that. But Western has done a really good job in women's basketball, and the guy they got there right now, Coach Collins, I think he's a fabulous coach.
Yep, he did a great job this year. He's doing a great job. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag. brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, ESPN had a planned documentary for Michael Jordan to come out. I think it was in June, and they decided amidst the coronavirus lockdown, they would go ahead and release it. And so they released the first 2 parts last night. I've not seen it, I have to be honest. I saw some of the clips and listened to some of the interviews with the people who were involved in the documentary, and it sounds fascinating to me. But you did watch it, and I want to get your first, right off the press, I guess, opinion of it.
I liked it.
What really stands out?
Well, I like Michael. Michael Jordan is a player that that I always thought he's the best player I've ever watched, to be honest with you, the best competitor, and so I was always fascinated with him. So, watching that series last night was, of course, it's a 10-part series. So the first 2 were last night.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. If you like Michael Jordan, you're going to like it, and it gives some of the insights and that maybe people may not be quite as aware of, and some of the drama with that last team. Their last team that they had together when they was going for the 6 championships. What was unusual about it, they announced before the year that this is it for them. They weren't bringing the coach back. They weren't bringing some other players, and it's kind of interesting. They disbanded a team that, Jordan was 34 that could probably have won some more, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think Jordan retired initially after that year. He later came back and played for the Wizards for a minute.
But he wasn't going to retire. He said he wasn't going to play for another coach, and they weren't going to bring Phil Jackson back.
Yeah. He pulled a power play, and I think Jerry Reinsdorf thought he would try to call the bluff, and Jordan was not bluffing.
No.
And then Scottie Pippen went to the Blazers, and to be honest, they really should have been in the title, but they blew a Game 7 against the Lakers when Phil Jackson had gone to the Lakers to coach.
Yeah, the second episode last night was a lot about Scottie Pippen, and it was, there's a side of him that brought back some memories. He had a side to him that I think was borderline at times selfish and so forth. The general manager did a really good job in terms of organizing the team, but was not very well liked. And there were some scenes that had to do with him and Pippen and even Jordan. And even though I think overall the series is going to be very favorable with Michael Jordan, of course, it's about him and so forth. There's some sides to that team and to those people that not quite as favorable, but overall, I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you mentioned the GM, Jerry Krause. He's now the late Jerry Krause. He's no longer with us. I guess he died a couple of years ago. He took a lot of heat for them basically announcing before the season that this was it. This was the end of the run, and they wanted to rebuild the team more or less from scratch. And without Phil Jackson, but the players were welcome to redo their contracts and stick around if they wanted to, and they didn't.
Yeah, he did a great job of building them. He, went out and drafted Pippen that nobody had heard of, and got Rodman to sign, and he traded for Bill Cartwright. He made a lot of shrewd moves, but the same person that kind of built it was ready to move on and to end it.
Yeah,
which seemed premature.
It's kind of the classic clash of egos, in my opinion.
Yeah, to sum up the first 2 series, ego is very accurate. There's a lot of egos involved.
Yeah, because you look at, Michael Jordan no doubt believes he's the best player in the world, and he is.
Yep.
But Jerry Krause had come to probably believe he was the best GM in the world and that he could do it again. And it would seem like that Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause never got along. I've not seen the documentary, but going back to reporting through the years, it's like they never actually liked each other.
That seems that way. That's exactly right. But I don't know. It just always like my two favorite players was always Michael Jordan and Larry Bird.
Yeah.
and they're very similar in terms of their competitiveness. The style of play obviously different.
Yeah.
But their competitiveness was, and that was one of the clips they showed when I think Michael Jordan's second year in the league, playoff game against Boston, he put up 64.
Yeah.
And Bird's pretty much says the greatest performance he'd ever seen.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be fascinating. I'll catch it back up and listen to it later. Check it out. This is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.